Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. On the agenda tonight, we have Steve Lukather, and Steve, of course, from Toto. He's going to be playing through his version of the Jimi Hendrix track, Red House, and this is coming from 2003. So let's get Steve up on screen and see how he gets on. I'm just going to jump in here. So much to talk about already. First of all, I just want to draw attention to Steve's voice. He's got such a strong vocal. I know that with Toto, he was predominantly a backing singer, or at least he was until about 1997. I think they were without a singer for quite a few years, and then Steve actually stepped in to supply lead vocal, and then later on, then we went back into that backing vocal position. But he's got such a great vocal here. What I love as well is the fact that he's not keeping it exactly the same as that Hendrix sound everyone will know, or if you don't know, I know the Red House licks very well from the recorded version from the album, just because I listen to it so much. But Steve certainly goes a little bit off-piste, but he throws in his own style, his own way of playing it. And I know that Steve's had a lot of blues players that he was influenced by. He also was influenced by John McLaughlin, who I did a video on yesterday that was unfortunately blocked on copyright. So you'll have to take my word for it that John is a top player as well. And Steve has certainly looked at John's style and the way that he throws together jazz lines. So Steve isn't a stranger to throwing in some really cool jazz in amongst that blues as well. If you've heard any of the Toto tracks and guitar solos, you'll know that Steve can play, that he can really emote through the guitar, and he always plays exactly what's needed for the track. He's got so many weapons in his arsenal, but he rarely just throws them all in your face. He just plays so tastefully and puts together so many cool lines. It's great to see him really let his hair down. Another thing about Steve is that when he's playing and he gets into a little bit more of his technical work and starts to speed up these runs, his vibrato never suffers. He always gets back to that same vibrato. I mention it in other videos where guitarists that play fast all the time, sometimes that speed can leak into the vibrato because they start to lose control of it, whereas Steve has absolutely got control of that slow vibrato. We're going to see it here where he does play these faster passages but still ends with a really cool vibrato on frets but also at the top of bends. Technique wise, we'll be able to see that he's got great alternate picking, and he does like to throw in a lot of whammy bar stuff as well, tiny little dives on notes and ascending up to notes with the whammy bar. He's got great control of that whammy bar as well. I think that just comes with playing in the 80s. It was like the cool thing to have real control of that. Let's get into a little bit more of the track.
Wait a minute, something's wrong, wait a minute, something's wrong, wait a minute, something's wrong, hey! See the keys on the lock the door. Wait a minute, something's wrong, hey! Keys
And I've just got to jump in here because we saw just those really subtle touches on that whammy bar to give such a great effect with that little run that he was doing. And blink and you'll miss it. Steve is so good with these kind of techniques. He throws it in there, and all you do is you hear the product of the technique. You don't actually see or hear the techniques happening because he's so smooth with it all. Another thing, Steve really now pulling back on the tone, going totally clean, and very few players like to do that, especially if they're reliant on effect. And that can start to happen with heavier genres, certainly, where players start to rely on overdrive and delay and all the effects. And then when they strip back the sound and just go purely clean, it really does highlight the inadequacies of their playing and their control and their expression. It's one of those things a lot of players are frightened of playing clean because they rely on effects, where Steve's absolutely got it all nailed. Again, prime example. And there, Steve, instead of using the whammy bar, he was striking down on the bridge, which if you do play guitar, and if you've got a floating bridge, or if you've got a Floyd Rose and you hit down on that bridge, it's going to raise the pitch. But the way that Steve did it there, he's absolutely just combining the run that he's playing with that right hand, hitting down exactly when he's changing the note on the run. So really subtle stuff, gives such a great sound. And then right at the end, just press down that whammy bar, play the note, and then let that whammy bar come up, which means that then the note will ascend and end up at the note that you're holding down on the fretboard. So really great use of technique. The thing about this performance in particular is the way that Steve is going to that more major bass, the more major bass scales, exactly like Hendrix would do as well. Really keeping a lot of blues scale in there as well, and pentatonics obviously, but he's going from that minor into that major, really blending nicely. He has little diversions away into a tiny bit of jazz, but then he'll put it straight back again into that blues. So just taking it off-piste a little bit, but then always coming back is what the great players can do. They've always got another avenue that they can take you down if they want to, but then they'll always bring you back home into the feel and the groove of the track. Let's get into a little bit more. So Steve really starting to let his hair down here, putting in a little bit of tapping, just another technique that we haven't seen yet in this performance, but he's throwing absolutely everything in here. And one thing that I want to draw everybody's attention to is not only the amazing playing. Everyone, when they watch a guitarist playing to this standard, is just amazing and everyone will be blown away, but looking at the details, just looking at almost like a line graph of the performance in terms of the dynamics, all the great players not only play to a great technical standard, but they've all got an appreciation. So when Steve started out, it's that really full-on tone, shouting, the guitar's like shouting, and then when he starts to roll off that volume and went totally clean, so now it's like a whisper. And watching the last minute or so, there's a gradual increase back up. If you were to see a line graph, it would just be slightly increasing all the way back up to where he started. And it's just a journey. It's a dynamic journey. All the top players do this and have an appreciation of this, and you'll see it all the time. A lot of players that maybe don't have the appreciation will just be at one level for the whole performance, and it will get a bit boring. And you could see when he actually started playing with his thumb, he's actually throwing in a softer sound with that cleaner lead tone. And of course, a huge part of that is the rest of the band as well, the drums and the bass, really bringing it down to the same level that Steve is with his guitar. We've got Peter Steegs on drums, and we've also got Jules Peters on bass. And just to finish with a quick word on Steve and the work that he's done outside of Toto as well as a session player. He's played on so many different albums and tracks. He was all over. He was involved in everything on Michael Jackson's Thriller album, and what an album that was to be involved with, to play the guitar on that. He also played the guitar solo on the Olivia Newton-John track Physical. I think everyone knows that track. Even if you don't want to know that track, you probably know how it goes. But it shows how versatile Steve is with his playing, that he can play some seriously cool blues, rock and jazz, but then he can just absolutely turn that playing into pop if he wants to. As a writer, he's written for Lionel Richie and Richard Marx and Chicago as well. So he's not only a great player, he's a great all-round musician, but also a great composer as well. And he has that most coveted thing of being able to write a song and write a hit. There are so many guitar players who are at such an impressive technical level, but cannot write a song that is going to connect with people and become a hit. So Steve Lukather, a triple threat here, great vocal, great lead playing, but the hardest thing of all, he can write a hit. And also he's won awards for his production, so he's kind of a quadruple threat if you want to add that in as well. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one.